Well, good morning once again on just a transcendently beautiful spring May weekend. And those of you worshiping with us at our other campuses, just want to welcome you. Today we have another installment in this series called Reason to Believe from John's account of the life of Jesus in the New Testament of a Bible. Question, how many of you have ever worked out in a hotel fitness room? Any of you, like a little workout place, got at a hotel? Okay, just imagine you're there, you're traveling, it's been a long day, you feel sluggish, you just need to get your body moving, and outside, it's a downpour. And so taking a walk around the area, it's probably not gonna work out. So you go down to the hotel fitness room, there's a couple treadmills there, Stairmaster, a couple other gadgets. There's a person on one of the treadmills, you take the accompanying treadmill and you start to walk and you're gonna jog. And the person next to you, they're different. And by different, I just mean they're not normal like you. And your treadmill stop at about the same time. And the person on the other treadmill, the different person, they reach for a Gatorade, open the Gatorade, take a long chug on their Gatorade and then look at you and hand it to you. Okay, decision time. To drink or not to drink? That is the question. Okay, show of hands, declare yourself. How many, no stinking way, not under any circumstances am I putting my lips on that bottle? Okay, how many of you are, hey, I'm a brave soul, doesn't bother me, chug away? Okay, 4 of you, all right? How many of you are afraid to answer because you know that I'm luring you into a trap? All right, yeah, you won't declare yourselves. All right, now, switch up the scenario. You're running, they're running. It's your Gatorade. You get off, you're chugging on the Gatorade, and then you look at the person next to you and they go, hey, can I have some of that? Yeah, sure. I just live it up, you know. They chug on it, they hand it back, you go, no, I'm all set, just kind of finishing it. Now, if this feels like a weird conversation to you, that you would be with a stranger, someone you do not know, someone you do not trust, and they are interested in putting their lips up to the same vessel that you are drinking from. If that feels weird to you, you've got to understand, the story that we're gonna look at is much weirder and much stranger because of the people involved and some of the social dynamics involved. If you opened a Bible to John chapter 4 in the New Testament, Jesus is traveling, he's tired. His disciples, they go into the nearby town, they're buying some groceries. Jesus, it says, he sits down outside of town by a well, and then this woman comes out and she's got a pitcher that she's gonna attach to a rope, lower down into the well, bring it back up. And Jesus looks at this woman and he says, hey, can I have a drink from that? And she is absolutely stunned that he would put his lips up to her drinking vessel. So John chapter 4, verse 7, we find these words. It says, now a Samaritan woman came to draw water. Jesus said to her, will you give me a drink? Can I have a drink out of that? I mean, just like the hotel fitness center thing, you're chugging on a Gatorade and someone says, yeah, can I have a drink from that? This is Jesus, same thing. Can I have a drink from your water? And now it says in verse 9, it says, the Samaritan woman said to him, you are a Jew and I'm a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink? And then a little parenthesis here, the Jews do not associate with the Samaritans. These are 2 different racial groups. These are 2 different social groups. These people do not connect, they do not communicate, and they certainly do not drink from each other's Gatorade bottles or from each other's water pots. Just a little bit of background here on what's going on. Samaria was in the middle. You had Jews that lived in the south in Judea. You had Jews that lived in the north in Galilee. Samaria was the space between where the Jews lived, and the Samaritans lived in the space between. The capital, Jerusalem, is in Judea. That's in the south. Jesus traveled there for many of the festivals. He teaches in the temple courts. It's where he's going to get executed. The resurrection happens in Judea. It's where the Jesus movement launches with the day of Pentecost, 50 days after Jesus' crucifixion. That is in Judea. Galilee is where Jesus spent much of his time during his 3 years of ministry. His headquarters right up there, Capernaum on the north shore of the Sea of Galilee. Jesus was raised in Galilee. It's where Nazareth is, Jesus' town that he's raised in. Samaria was in the middle. And these groups did not like or trust each other. Centuries before, there had been a war. Armies swept from the north. And there was an army that conquered Samaria, and they deported much of the population. The way we'll keep you from getting all patriotic and starting an uprising is just to take you out of your country and scatter you around our empire. But they not only deported people from the area, they also imported people from other countries, other people groups, and these groups intermarried with each other, and those from other countries brought their idols with them. And so Samaria was seen as like a contaminated gene pool, racially inferior, and the belief system that they had come up with, heretical, like false, bad theology. In fact, there was a time where in Jerusalem, the temple had been destroyed. They're gonna rebuild the temple. Samaritans said, we'll come help rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. And people in Jerusalem were kind of like, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. You're racially inferior heretics. You know, we don't trust you. And so they said, that's fine. We'll build our own temple up here. And so there's this huge deal about what was the place to worship. Was it Jerusalem or was it on Mount Gerizim in Samaria? So the Samaritans built their temple, and then Jews came from the south and they burned it to the ground. There's history here. Not just years of history, there are generations of bad blood. Listen, this is a conversation that shouldn't even be happening between Jesus and this woman. By the way, the disciples were not traveling with Jesus to Samaria. They're traveling to Galilee. They just want to get through Samaria. Samaria is not a destination. Samaria to them is an obstacle to get through. We just want to get out of this place and to get back to territory. It was often a comment that someone would exit Samaria, and before they would leave, they would shake out their robes so that all of the Samaritan dust stayed in Samaria before they walked back into the homeland, you know. You literally shake the dust. We don't want any Samaritan dirt in Judea or in Galilee. So Jesus is sitting down, Samaritan woman comes out, this Jewish guy sitting there, and he says, can I have a drink from your water pitcher? This was not done. She says, I can't believe you're asking me for a drink. This conversation shouldn't even be taking place. Secondly, and this is nuanced a little bit because we don't really get this in our culture, is the male-female thing that's going on. There are cultures that look down on men simply because they're men. Treat men with contempt simply because they're male. And there are cultures that look down on women simply because they're women. And in Jewish culture of the first century, it was believed by men that women were inferior. I mean, there was a famous Jewish prayer that was just kind of like, God, I thank you that I'm not female. A man would pray that. And this was not a joke. This was like, I thank you that I'm not of the lower order. And so he shouldn't be talking to her, not only for a distinguished Jewish rabbi to have a conversation with a woman, a casual conversation, that wouldn't happen either. But then thirdly, there's another layer here, and that is, as we read through the story, morally, let's just say her background was a little sketchy. So she's from a different race. She's from what would have been considered in Jesus' day the inferior gender. She's got a sketchy moral past. The thing that would most commonly be done is she comes to the well, guy gets up, guy walks away, and he doesn't. Jesus asked for a drink from her water pitcher. Whatever prejudice is, our ability to prejudge someone, the ability to decide we don't like them even before we get to know them, Jesus just seems above it. And what we're gonna discover in this conversation that takes place, actually a series of conversations, is that God is often at work in unexpected places. See, the disciples, they see Samaria as a place to get through. They see Samaria as an obstacle. Jesus saw Samaria as an opportunity. He sees the fact that this woman has come at the well when he happens to be there in a one-on-one conversation as a massive opportunity for her to gain some spiritual insight. The disciples see Samaria as an obstacle. Jesus saw Samaria as an opportunity. My friends, this is huge. This is particularly huge when you get to those spaces in life that you don't want to be in. You know what I'm talking about? I'm talking about the for now jobs. So what do? Well, for now, listen, you've been there 18 months. You didn't want to be there 18 days. You kind of go, what do you want more than anything else? To get out of here. This is just an obstacle to my life. It's a student, oh, you're graduating. No, I'm not. I have 2 classes left. I cannot take them online. Neither of them are offered over the summer. I have to stick around all summer long to take 6 credits in the fall. What do you want more than anything else? To be done, to get out of here. Listen, often God is at work, chooses to be at work in unexpected places. Often we see an obstacle and there's a massive opportunity and we're blind to it. The construction on the house was supposed to start in June. You were supposed to move in September. The construction actually begins in September and you won't be in until January. Meanwhile, you're living in your in-laws' basement. Wonderful place to be. What do you want more than anything else? To get out of here. Often God is at work at unexpected times and in unexpected places. And in this conversation that takes place beside this well in Samaria, we're going to see God at work. And there's 3 different conversations that take place. The first is, we've already started, is a conversation that takes place between Jesus and the woman. Second conversation, she goes back to town. His disciples come from buying groceries. He has to do some retooling with his disciples and help them think differently and he's trying to get them to feel like he feels about people and think like he thinks about people. So there's a conversation with the disciples, and some people from the town come out, and there's an interaction with people in the town. So like these 3 different conversations over these verses in the story of the woman at the well. So let's just begin with the first conversation number 1. Let's dive in, the conversation with the woman. It's noon, Jesus is tired, sits down by the well. Disciples are in town to buy groceries. Woman comes out. She's about to get some water, and he says, can I have a drink from your water pitcher? And she is stunned and says, you're a Jew. I'm a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink from my water pitcher? Jesus has a very interesting response in verse 14 of this chapter. Jesus says this. Jesus answered her, if you knew the what? 3 words, the gift of God, which is interesting. If you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. Jesus said, if you knew what the gift of God was, now a gift is something you cannot earn and do not deserve. So whatever he's talking about here cannot be earned. You can't be good enough to get it. It's just kind of got to be received. Gifts are not earned. Paychecks are earned. Gifts can only be received. He says, if you knew what the gift of God was, and if you knew who it was you were talking to, I'm asking you for water, you'd be asking me for living water. Now, what Jesus is doing here is he's using water as a metaphor for that which sustains and enables life. In our culture, this is easily lost because, there's a convenience store always a couple miles away. We drive cars and there's Aquafina and tap water in houses. When you're walking between village to village in a Mediterranean sun, if you're out working with sheep all day, listen, water was life. Faucets were not all over. You knew where the wells were. You knew where the water was, or you would be in trouble really, really fast. When Jesus is talking about water, he talks about that which will sustain your life. But he's not talking about liquid water. What he's turning to here is our deep longings. That is the longing for something in life where we kind of go, if only I have that, then I will be whole, then I will be significant, then all will be well if only I have that. This, my friends, has to do with our longings. Let me ask you the question, what are you thirsty for? There's another way to ask it. What's driving you? Because often in answering that question, if we're insightful and if we're honest, and if we can answer the question, what's driving me? Why do I work so hard? Why do I always have to be right in a conversation, in an argument? Why do I have to prove this? If I answer the question, what's driving me, chances are I have just discovered what I am using as a counterfeit God. That is, I am trusting in something other than God, something other than Christ to rescue me. I'm trusting in that to save me. Now, we're gonna look at a couple quotes. I mentioned this guy a couple weeks ago. His name's Tim Keller. Tim Keller is a pastor of a church in New York City, Manhattan, cosmopolitan, educated congregation. And in his writings, I just imagine him speaking to a New York audience, possessions, money, success, and just talk to them again and again about the counterfeit gods that we invite into our life. So in his book, by that title, Counterfeit Gods, Keller wrote this. He says, listen, an idol, that is a counterfeit God. It's not God, but it's a God substitute. An idol is whatever you look at and say in your heart of hearts, if I have that, then I will feel my life has meaning. Then I'll know I have value. Then I'll feel significant and secure. Do you know what that is for you? So dangerous about this is often we don't even know this is going on. If I arrive at this income level, if I get this raise, if I get this bonus, if I'm able to attach myself to this person, if I finish this degree, then I'll feel my life has meaning, then I'll know I have value, then I'll feel significant and secure. Now, many of those things I just mentioned, income, education, those are good things. The problem isn't that they're good. The problem is they're good and we make them God. We take something good, like a house, or a person, or an achievement, and we turn it into something it was never intended to do. And my friends, this can eat you alive. Counterfeit gods, we take something good and we make it God, and then it can become dangerous. It can become lethal. So in preparation for this series, Reason to Believe, I just devoured this book. It's called, same author, Tim Keller, Encounters with Jesus, where his first 5 chapters are on different one-on-one conversations Jesus has from the Gospel of John. And one of those is the woman beside the well. And in his chapter at the woman at the well, he quotes just an interesting person. It's a novelist by the name of David Foster Wallace. David Foster Wallace, you maybe never heard of him before, was kind of a groundbreaking, boundary-pushing, postmodern novelist, award-winning, et cetera, et cetera. He was not a believer, did not have faith as we can see, but there's this famous graduation address he gave, commencement address. It happened to be at Kenyon College, and this is years back. So he's looking out at, cap and gown, university graduates, and this is what he said about worship. Listen to this. He says, everybody worships. Everybody. Everybody worships. The only choice we get is what to worship. And the compelling reason for maybe choosing some sort of God to worship is that pretty much anything else you worship will eat you alive. And he rolls out some examples. He says, if you worship money and things, if they are where you tap real meaning in life, check this out, then you will never have enough. Never feel that you have enough. It's the truth. Worship your own body and beauty and sexual allure, and you will always feel ugly. And when time and age start showing, you will die a million deaths before your loved ones finally plant you. Worship power, and you will end up feeling weak and afraid. You will need even more power over others to numb you to your own fear. Worship your intellect, being seen as smart, and you will end up feeling stupid, a fraud, always on the verge of being found out. Now, this is a guy who's approaching life without Jesus at the center without a religious framework. And he's just saying, listen, you're gonna worship something. He says the only reason for, worshiping a God is that anything else will eat you alive. It's from David Foster Wallace, who committed suicide a couple years after that commencement speech. So money and things, body and beauty, power and control, being seen as smart. Make one of those things your God, it can't eat you alive. Again, back to that definition of idolatry from Keller's other book, Counterfeit Gods. An idol is whatever we look at and basically say, you will do it for me. If I get you, if I get that, now I have value. Now I'm secure. Now I'm significant. He just goes, this is not just misplaced dependence. Yeah, I know, God is God. I make something else God. He says this can destroy you. Parenting moment, if I may. As parents, we unintentionally disciple our children in idolatry. When we give our kids the impression, if you get that, then you will have happiness. You will have everything you need. Sometimes there is a pressure we put on our kids. Man, you have to do good in school. Why? Well, if you aren't good in school, you're not gonna get that scholarship. Well, what? If you don't get that scholarship, then you're not gonna go to that college. Or what? Well, if you don't go to that college, then you're not gonna get that degree, which leads to that career and that income level and that house, so that I just want you to be happy. Just for curiosity, any of you know any unhappy doctors? Any unhappy vice presidents? Any unhappy CEOs? We might be coaching them. You have to have that. We might be coaching them in their misplaced dependency. When Jesus is with this woman and he says, can I have a drink from your pitcher? And she says, I can't believe we're even having this conversation. Jesus, if you knew who I was, sister, you'd be asking me for water. We're looking at John chapter 4. In John chapter 7, Jesus is not in Samaria, he's in the south, he is in Judea, he's at the temple, and it's a festival time, and it says on the last and greatest day of the feast, Jesus stood up and in a loud voice, listen, he yells across the temple compound, if anyone is thirsty, let him come to me and drink. We spend our time with our faces in these other mud puddles, thinking if we just lap up enough, we will have enough and we will be enough. And the thirst continues and continues and continues. And it can be debilitating. See, God is at work in unexpected places. Jesus uses his own physical thirst and just wanting a drink of water to talk about her spiritual, emotional thirst. You look at that list of counterfeit gods and kind of wonder, what was hers? What was she looking for where she said, if I only have that, then I'll be enough. If I only have that, then I'll be enough. If I only have that, then I'll be enough. There's a strong indication in the story that she was looking to men to fill the empty space in her heart. And this comes out because in verse 16, Jesus says, I'd really like to continue this conversation, but it'd kind of be appropriate if your husband was here. So why don't you go get your husband and bring him back and we'll sit here and continue this conversation. Verse 16, he told her, go call your husband and come back. And she says, no, I'm single. I have no husband, she replied. Yeah, I'm not married. Jesus said to her, you are right when you say that you have no husband. The fact is, you have had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. What you have just said is quite true. Gulp. He goes, yeah, you're right. You're not married, but you've somehow managed to burn through 5 marriages. And the guy you're hooking up with right now, he won't even give you his name, will he? And she looks back and she goes, he knows me. Now, not just the detail of the 5 marriages and now the guy she's hooking up with thing, but I think as he sits there and pauses, she goes, he knows everything about me. He sees me, but he sees right through me. He knows me. But here's the crazy thing. He knows her and he's calling it what it is, but he's kind. He's not throwing things. He doesn't seem to be embarrassing her. He's not repelled. He's not repulsed. He doesn't march away. He sees her. He knows her. But everything about the conversation is inviting. See, what's so beautiful in this conversation is because we often think in relationship to other people, if you really knew me, you wouldn't want me. And here Jesus is going like, no, I know you. And I'm very interested in the condition of your heart and the condition of the soul and where you are in life. She realizes that this is not an ordinary person. She thinks she's not with a prophet, someone like hears from God. He does. And she goes, listen, so I got a question. You know, you Jewish people, you say, Jerusalem is a place to worship. Up here in Mount Gerizim, you know the temple you guys burned down? We think this is the place to worship. And Jesus goes into this brief thing where he says, listen, the day's gonna come where you don't have to find the right building to worship in. He says, God is a spirit, and those who will worship him in spirit and in truth. And a building that you locate at temple will be irrelevant. She then says, well, you know, someday we believe that Messiah will come. And when Messiah comes, all this is gonna get it sorted out and he's gonna explain all this. Verse 25, the woman said, I know that Messiah called Christ is coming. When he comes, he will explain everything to us. And Jesus said, I am the one, I, the one speaking to you, am he. Well, that's me. I believe that when Messiah comes, he's gonna explain everything. And Jesus goes, and she believes him. And just as this part of the conversation is going on, 12 guys are coming back from the Samaritan village with the groceries. The woman is still in the scene, but now the disciples are in the scene as well. And so we're gonna bridge into the second conversation, which is Jesus' conversation with the disciples. But for a spell, they kind of blend over into each other because she's not fully gone yet when they show up. So they come out, there's a woman, Samaritan, with her water pitcher. There's Jesus, and they're involved in this deep conversation. And literally the disciples are going, what's up with this? But none of them ask. Just then the disciples returned and were surprised to find him talking with a woman. But no one asked, what do you want? Or, why are you talking with her? Nobody asked that, but what they were thinking was, what do you want? And why are you talking with her? These are the two questions that are on their mind as they kind of observe this. See, Jesus is going to try to explain to them that often God is at work in unexpected places. And often what they see is a crisis to overcome. Look, no, we just want to have lunch and get out of here. Jesus sees as a massive opportunity. So the woman gets up, little detail, it says she leaves her jar, the reason that she came to the well, she leaves the jar, she heads back to town. And verse 29 is really interesting. She says to the folks in town, she says, listen, come see a man who told me what? Everything I ever did. And people in town go, woo. That's an exaggeration, but she's basically saying he knows what? He knows everything. He knows everything. I want you to come out, see a man who told me everything. And then she asked a question, could this be the Messiah? Could this be the Messiah? She has known Jesus for what, 20 minutes? Half an hour? We don't know how long the conversation took. She's already corralling people to come out and have a conversation with Jesus. She knows next to nothing but this. Come see a man that told me everything I ever did. He knows me. He knows me. So this is a wonderful opportunity for Jesus to talk with his disciples about farming. Verse 35, don't you have a saying? It's still 4 months until harvest. Isn't there like a proverb that goes around? It's still 4 months, like hold your horses. Like, Rome wasn't built in a day. Isn't there a saying that goes around 4 months and then comes harvest? You plop a tomato plant into the ground in late May, June. You don't walk out the next week and have salsa. There's a little bit of time lapse that has to take place before, it's time to pick tomatoes from this tomato plant. He says, don't you have a saying, 4 months and then comes harvest. He says, but I tell you, open your eyes and look at the fields. They are what? He said, they are ripe for harvest. He's saying, guys, you've got a saying, harvest someday, harvest someday, harvest someday. I'm telling you, the harvest is taking place right now. There is going to be a harvest that takes place right now. And then he says this, he says, verse 37, thus the saying, one sows and another reaps is true. Why is he doing this? One sows, another reaps. And then he will go on the way saying, look, you guys didn't even do the hard work. Someone else planted, and then you come in and you have the harvest. So why in the world is Jesus talking about farming in the middle of this quench your thirst, longings of life conversation? One person plants, another person harvests. It's late summer, mom piles a couple kids into a family car, and they drive out the lake shore, get these little pails to pick blueberries. And the kids are good with this for about 16 seconds. Well, until they're full of eating the blueberries and the pail's half full. And you go, I can't believe we have to do all, Mom, you can buy these at Meijer, right? I mean, we don't have to pick these. In fact, there are pails right over there that you can buy. Why do we have to do all the work? Well, technically, they haven't done all the work. Someone planted the blueberry bush. Someone cultivated the soil. Someone fertilized. Someone cut back the weeds. When we view a blueberry picking out at the lakeshore, someone else did the planting. You just happen to do the harvesting. This is the image that Jesus is after here. What in the world is he talking about? And why is this conversation important to us? What's going to happen in the third conversation is there's some people coming out of town, and they have open and receptive and cultivated hearts, and they're ready to believe in who Jesus is. You're going, you got to be kidding me. And Jesus is breaking this down for the disciples. He says, you got to understand, somebody else did the planting here. Somebody else did the planting. I think it was John the Baptist who preceded Jesus. And there is a lot of evidence that John the Baptist was very close to this region. People from the Samarian village of Sychar, they go out, they hear John preach. He says, the kingdom is about to come. No, I'm not the one, but the one is coming, just this woman. When Messiah comes, he's going to explain this to us. What in her, she seems like such cultivated soil. It's not hard-packed ground. I think John the Baptist, that his ministry softened the soil and that seeds began to grow. And Jesus is saying, listen, we're just about ready to see a harvest right now of people believe in me. And you guys didn't do any of the planting and any of the cultivating. We're about to receive a harvest, and we will have joy in that, but someone else did most of the hard work. I think this is so valuable for us because some of us are petrified to have a Jesus conversation with someone. We have a casual conversation, a work conversation. We'd even say they're close friends. But how in the world do you turn a normal conversation about vacations and real estate and what restaurant did you go to over the weekend and Tigers closing pitching, whatever the conversation happens to be about, how can you turn that into, so do you know Jesus personally? I mean, it just feels so awkward and difficult to make that, and it should be one of the most natural things in the world. Why is that so challenging for some of us? I suggest to you that one of the reasons it's so challenging is because we feel like all of the work is on us. I got a question. What if God is at work before that conversation happens? And what if God is at work after that conversation happens? What if it's possible that you can step into someone's life and say, hey, I I know that your teenage son has run off the rails, and I know that you're still devastated from when your husband left 2 years ago. We're starting a new sermon series next week. I want you to attend with me. I will sit with you. I will walk you into the building, and we'll have lunch after. If you don't like it, then just call it one and done. But I think there's something there for you, and I think that God is there in the middle of your mess, and I want to be part of it with you. Here we go. When you have a conversation like that just nudges a person's spiritual growth, assume that God is already at work before you got there. What if somebody else has already been planting? What if it was a grandmother that faithfully prayed for that person day after day after day after day? What if it was a consistent Christian that worked for them or that they worked for, an employee or a boss? What if it was an Easter service that they went to 4 years before, their heart was touched and moved and they don't even know why, and all of this planting has taken place, and suddenly you go to church with me next week, and they go, okay. Sometimes that doesn't happen. And sometimes it does. It gets crazier. Sometimes someone goes, yeah, I went to that Easter service with you. Thanks so much for inviting me. We looked at that prayer by Lee Strobel, and as I was sitting there, I prayed that and invited Jesus into my life. And you go, this is easy. You reach out and an apple drops into your hand. Trust me, you might have been there for the harvest, but somebody else did the planting. What this means is that all the work doesn't have to be you. It also means that you can engage a person in a spiritual conversation that points them Jesus' word, kind of like, okay, dude, listen, we got to talk. You were passed over for that promotion and you were devastated. Listen, I would have been disappointed, maybe even depressed for a while, but this has crushed you. This has destroyed you. But please hear this from me, and I'm not trying to judge. I just suspect that you're trying to fill the deepest longing of your heart with a position, and I think only God can fill that. I think only God through Jesus can fill that. Whew. And there it is. They go, thank you very much. And then they get transferred to Minneapolis or Omaha, Nebraska, and you go, well, that didn't work. What if your job is to plant seeds and 4 years from now, that was one of the seeds that grows into a harvest? Jesus says one person plants, another person harvests. I suspect that it was John the Baptist that did the planting, and how Jesus is there and these people from Samaria are going to believe. What this means for us is, listen, be courteous, be gracious, be respectful, be kind, and open your mouth from time to time. Be consistent, show up on time. Don't talk rudely about people. Don't take things that aren't yours. Those undermine the message of Jesus. But if you're attempting to follow your Christ with fumbling steps and you're dialing into that, you realize that you are flawed too, but there are just these opportunities to speak into other people's lives. Just realize you don't have to carry the whole conversation. Maybe someone was planting before you got there. Maybe someone will harvest after you're there. Trust that God may be at work before the conversation and that God may be at work after the conversation, and that the whole load doesn't rest on you. I don't know about you, but I find this strangely liberating. Just going, all I got to do is plant seeds. All I got to do is ask questions. Maybe it's harvest time, maybe it's not. Maybe I'm seed planting. I just need to have the courage to engage in open conversation and to learn to talk as freely about Jesus as I do about trivial things. Restaurants, sport teams, whatever. It's conversation number 2. Disciples. See, here's the deal. They want one thing. They want to get out of Samaria. Jesus is trying to tutor them. He's trying to, technical word, he's trying to disciple the disciples on the fact that often God is at work in unexpected places. And one of those unexpected places was right here with this woman and the people that are about ready to come out of town. Some of the people coming, here's the craziness. Some of the people coming out of the village of Sychar out to the well to see Jesus are already believers. Based upon the one sentence testimony of 5 marriage living with a guy woman. He told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Messiah? And they look at her and they said, we believe. That's how ripe this fruit is. Some of them believe simply based on that testimony. Third conversation, as we wrap up, is just the town. These people come out in just a couple verses. Verse 39, many of the Samaritans from that town believed in him because of what? Because of the Because of the woman's testimony, he told me everything I ever did. Many people so they come out and they see Jesus. Remember the disciples, we just want to get out of here. And Jesus is going like, yeah, hold on, there might be opportunity here. And they come up to Jesus and say, could you stick around for a while? Jesus stays in Samaria 2 more days. Jesus camps out at this location for 2 more days to talk. And as he talks, they listen, to converse, to dialogue. They said to the woman, last verse of the section, they said to the woman, we no longer believe just because of what you said. Now we have heard for ourselves, and we know that this man really is the rescuer. They believed that a rescuer was going to come. We believe that this man is the savior of the world. They knew that Messiah would come and rescue. They didn't comprehend. The disciples didn't comprehend that Jesus would end up hanging on a Roman cross to absorb the penalty for their sins, for their waywardness, for their drift. So they didn't understand everything, but there was enough to say, we think he's the one. We believe he's the one. It's a story about coming to faith. It's a story about having a reason to believe. A word about prejudice. Word prejudice means to prejudge. Prejudice, to prejudge. Meaning, I don't know you, I don't have to get to know you, I already know about you because I know something about you. And prejudging people is really, really easy. And I think rather than saying, am I prejudiced, am I not prejudiced? I think it's probably healthier to say, where are my prejudices? Where do I prejudge people? People with high education sometimes prejudge people without degrees. Often people without degrees judge people with lots of college. It's possible for people with a lot of money to judge people that don't have a lot of money. And it's possible for people without a lot of money to hate people with a lot of money. Prejudice can work in any different number of directions. It's possible for women to hate men because they're men and to despise them because they're men. It's possible for men to dislike women simply because they're women. It's possible for people from one ethnic group, whether it's African American, Asian, Hispanic, or Caucasian, to distrust or despise or show with contempt another ethnic or racial group. Jesus just seemed to be above the whole thing. Here's a Samaritan woman. Here's a Samaritan woman. Sketchy past. Here's an opportunity to speak into her life. See, what the challenge is that when we prejudge someone, we judge them as unworthy of our time and attention. To prejudge someone is to treat them dismissively, to treat them as if they do not count for any number of reasons. To have a heart that beats with the heart of Christ is to attempt to daily ask for God's grace to see people as Jesus sees them, and to think about people as Jesus thinks about them. And often this will include 2 things, dignity and depravity. Individuals who, whatever their stripe, are made in the image of God, and yet desperately fallen as we are or were, and in need of the Christ. But you will miss these opportunities to show love if your sole goal is to simply get through a space, to see unwanted space as an obstacle rather than the opportunity. Even as I speak these words, I know that many of you are stuck in Samaria. Go, Jeff, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be at this stinking job one more day. And I'm going, okay, ask God to do one of the hardest things you'll ever do. Ask God to give you the grace to do one of the hardest things you'll ever do, to wake up in the morning and to open your hands and say, I'm about to drive again to a job I do not particularly care for. God, today just remind me, I'm planting seeds, I'm planting seeds, I'm planting seeds. I don't know why I'm still here, but I interact with 36 people a day. If you see that job simply as an obstacle to get through, it'll be a radically different experience than if you see daily opportunity to serve and to love people as God loves them. Here you are in chemotherapy again, another round in the same chair. Some of the same people end up sitting in the chairs near you. I have no idea why you're there. I would just suspect that there would be opportunity to bless and to love and to encourage. One of the greatest challenges in life is to go through a season of suffering without making the people around you suffer. To go through a season of suffering and to be one that blesses other people. I don't want to be here. I just want to get through this. I just want to get out of this. God, help me today to plant seeds, just to plant seeds, just to plant seeds. And maybe in my seed planting, I will discover that I get to be part of the harvest where other people have planted. To me, one of the things that makes this such a beautiful story is when the woman says, he knows everything I ever did. He sees me. He knows me. He wants me. He's interested in my heart. He's interested in my soul. He sees me and he's not repulsed and he is not running. I just want to ask you, is this a God you can trust? What you see about Jesus in this story, the way he knows her and yet invites her. This is one more reason to believe. What if he can be trusted with you? It's a reason to believe. And so I ask that our gracious God would soften hard hearts and open blind eyes, and that even today, people would step forward and say, I now believe. We ask this in the name of Jesus, who came here for us. Amen.